The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today we're going to be talking about quite a range of things. I think it's going to be some unique topics I haven't had on here yet. So we're going to be talking about analyzing threats, violence, self-defense, and maybe a little bit on the defense of others. For that, I have Nikki Burgett here. I'm saying that right? I want to make sure.
It's pretty close. It's Burgett, but it's Burgett.
All right. So Nikki is a behavioral threat assessment specialist with a background in law enforcement, corporate security, and international counterterrorism. Nikki has worked in 24 countries as a contractor for the U.S. Department of State, instructing foreign law enforcement and security personnel on anti-terrorism tactics. She's also the author of the recently released Surviving Violence: How to Prepare for, Prevent, and Respond to Violent Threats, a practical guide designed for civilians. She now consults with public and private sector organizations on workplace violence prevention, threat management, and leadership accountability. She strives to equip individuals with the mindset and tools to serve as their own first line of defense. And violence rarely occurs without warning, and inaction is not a strategy. Excellent words of advice. Welcome, Nikki.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Hey, I was saying just before we kind of recorded, so I read the book. There's a bunch of stuff I think is applicable here, not just for civilians. So a lot of this stuff is things that I've heard throughout my policing career as well. And I think it's something that could benefit a lot of police officers. If it's not the first time they've heard of it, it's a good refresher of a bunch of the concepts and things that we need to consider when we're just looking at a scenario that's in front of us or even mentally preparing ourselves. So I just wanted to put that out there right at the beginning. So the book, again, Surviving Violence, I think they should take a look at it, pick it up. It's on Amazon, so it's super easy to get. But yeah, I wanted to start just kind of talking about you. And your story is in this book a little bit, but maybe we could dive a little bit deeper to start. Can you just tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and some of your story, because it plays into why you do this work?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Kansas City and then moved around a lot as I got older for work. I spent 24 years in corporate jobs. And, growing up, I lived in a really rough areas. We moved a lot when my parents were still married, and saw a lot of things that just for us were just normal because of the areas that we lived in. I don't remember a whole lot until we got to Kansas City. So we lived along the East Coast, and then at some point moved back. I think I was like 4 or 5. And so some of the stuff that is in the book, ironically enough, I felt that it was important to talk about it because I'm talking about surviving violence. So I want people to understand where I come from, and that, I wasn't raised in this, beautiful cookie cutter home. Most people aren't. Most people have, they've all got skeletons in their closet or, things that they dealt with. So my story isn't necessarily unique, but professionally, I stopped talking about what happened to me as a kid, the abuse that I went through, the violence, and say I talk about fighting with my brothers. We fought all the time, and I mean physically. And there was punching and kicking, and when my mom wasn't home, sometimes it could get out of hand. Both my brothers were bigger than I was. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't an easy decision to put it in the book, but then it kind of made sense to put it in because I wanted people to know where it was all coming from. And people that I've known for a really long time read the book and they were like, I had no idea. And I said, well, that was the point, because the abuse that I went through doesn't define who I am. but it did change. I think that it changed the direction that ultimately that I went professionally.
Is this not something that you would normally talk about with people?
Oh no,
Okay.
no. I I hid it for a long time. In fact, so I don't know what it's like in Canada, but when I went into law enforcement here in the States, and I mentioned 24 years in corporate America, security became a part of everything that I did. If you're in operations, if you are facilities, it tends to overlap. Rarely do you have companies, unless they're huge, where they designate this as security. So it just tends to overlap a part of what a lot of people do, especially in operations, which is where I ended up a lot, that in facilities. So I started, pushing to keep employees safe. And then there was an incident that occurred 2014 in Moore, Oklahoma, and it was a beheading in Vaughn Foods. So it made national. It actually made international
Hmm.
news. It was a crazy incident. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not,
Yeah.
but I ended up winning a whole lot of legal or arguments with my legal team where they were like, we can't have anything but lockdown. You're not allowed to say active shooter. And I took that incident and presented it. I'm like, this is 2 hours away from us. I mean, how much closer do you want it to be before you start letting me do more than just lock a facility down? And they were like, okay, you win. So when I started going into that, the incident and researching it to find out, what had happened, the guy who stopped it was the former owner of the company. He had recently sold it, stayed on as the chief operating officer, I believe. And his name's Mark Vaughn. I talk about him in the
Mhm.
book. But he was a longtime reserve deputy for Oklahoma County, which means he had training to stop that threat, which is why he only beheaded one girl and not two. So I looked at that and thought, wow, it's one thing for me to petition and, fight to keep employees safe. It's something else to have that training to keep employees or to actually stop something like Mark did. And I recently got to meet him in person, which was a really big deal for me because to me, his whole story changed the direction that I went. Um, and yeah, I told him, I think it was really funny because meeting him for me was almost like meeting the most famous person in the world because that's his story had such a huge impact on my life that yeah, it was great to finally meet him. But we had had many conversations about what I could put in the book. I interviewed him actually very early on. They were still in court, so when I started asking him, what did you guys have in place prior to this incident happening? How would you dealt with workplace violence? And and then what direction were you going afterwards? And he had actually once that shortly after that incident happened, he actually left the company. But you don't get that kind of feedback
Yeah.
easily. Most companies are like, we see the active shooter, active threat as the scarlet letter A,
Hmm.
and nobody wants to talk about it. They just hunker down and hope that there's another one, and then people forget that it ever happened to them. So most companies won't talk about it.
Really?
It was great. Yeah, it was really great to be able to get that information from him. And then because of what I'd come from, when I went into law enforcement and you see even more violence. If you're familiar with that. I mean, you have domestic violence, you've got just crazy things that happen all the time. You're constantly trying to keep yourself safe. And as a reserve officer for the state of Oklahoma, we get half of the training as a full-time police officer. So I had kept my corporate job and then went into as a reserve officer to make me better at my job. And then that was I got accepted in 2015. So right before I had started my police academy, there was they threw money at me. They said, "Yeah, go ahead, train everything, write the policies, do all this." And I was like, "Yes, this is awesome." They said, "You still can't say active threat or active shooter." And I'm like, "I will call it the Mary Poppins plan. Don't care." I was so excited. Spent all the money in like the first quarter because they'll take it away if
You don't spend it.
and if business isn't great, then they'll redistribute funds and they'll take stuff back. And I had brought in some people from the local law enforcement to do some training for us, and they were doing one session in the morning and one in the afternoon. And in between there, somebody came in and said, "Hey, one of the executives wants to talk to you." And I went in and he said, "Yeah, your job doesn't exist anymore." Like it happened that fast.
Wow.
But we were oil and gas and then Jan San, which is janitorial stuff. And we are a big, huge distribution company. And they were like, we can't justify your position. So you can go to marketing or you can leave. So I went to marketing, but I wasn't going to give up what I'd worked so hard to get into. So in 2015, I did, I think for us, it was 6 months of training. So I did my law enforcement academy, and then I got my PMP, which is my project management certification, because they said that they would pay for it. And I learned a new job. 1 year later, I walked away from all of it and went 100% into the law enforcement side and started consulting on the workplace violence.
Okay.
And what I found in law enforcement was that the training that we had wasn't sufficient. I mean, mine wasn't sufficient because here I put on a uniform and there's nothing on my uniform that says, "Hey, she's only half a cop."
Yeah.
I had to do the whole job. So I just went all in on trying to get as much training as I could. We had no funding for training. So I was covering it myself. I would take copious amounts of notes and I would go sit down with my 3 officers and I'd like, "Hey, this is what I learned." And that turned into me becoming the training coordinator for my agency.
Okay.
And then eventually getting instructor certification so I could teach advanced stuff. They wouldn't let me teach basic law enforcement stuff because I was reserve. And that's something that the state doesn't permit. So it's funny. I was actually teaching courses for the State Department later overseas, and I could teach like instructor development for the State Department, but the state of Oklahoma wouldn't even let me take an instructor certification course. I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. But that's fine. The State Department says I'm qualified to teach it. Oklahoma says you can't even sit in the class.
That's crazy. I just wonder. It's funny how we get that kind of stuff here in law enforcement too. It's like you have access to a certain tool or a weapon system, and you could be an expert using it in one scenario, but they won't let you use it in another scenario. And you're like, I just think of our extended range weapon system, and we can use it in what's called our public safety unit, but you can't use it in patrol. And it's like, the use of force continuum is the use of force continuum, and pretty much the same thing with a few nuances. But they're like, no, and that's it. Just no. So we're like, okay, well, I guess one less person has access to it out there. But yeah, so and I'm wondering too, like when you were growing up and you were exposed to a lot of this violence, and you talk a bit about your past in there, was law enforcement always something that you looked to? Did you ever have interactions that kind of pushed you in that direction, good or bad? Maybe some things you didn't think would lead you there?
No, the funny thing is like never.
Yeah.
Never. I had some interaction with like child protective services. So I think it was always DHS is what it was in the state of Kansas. But I had no faith in them at all because of my interaction with them. But I had one lady show up to my house. I think at some point I probably shared what was going on with a friend, and then I would have been grade school. And that friend, I guarantee you, she told someone else. She probably told her parents. And I got called in, and the school counselor had me come in, and I talked to her, and they said that somebody would be coming to my house. Well, it scared me because I wasn't sure what that meant for me. And then when she showed up, I made her leave because my stepdad was coming home. I was like, "You have to go now. Like, you can't be here and you can't talk to him." She's like, "You don't want me to talk to him?" And I'm like, "Please don't talk to him." And she walked straight out and talked to him and then left me there alone with him.
Oh, geez.
So like I had like, no, it was such a bad experience that I wanted nothing to do. And at that point, I would have lied and said no, nothing happened, nothing was going on, just because I know that they wouldn't protect me. But I don't ever remember any interaction with law enforcement. When I went back to college in my 30s, I did my undergrad, and I wanted to go work for the FBI, but I didn't want. I wanted to be in an intel. I wanted to be intel. I wanted to be an analyst. I did not want to be a field agent at all. And the funny thing is, and this isn't in the book, but I kept applying in like 2007. I graduated 2008. I was working for an aerospace company. Had a great job. I mean, it was a killer job, and I just loved it. And then everything went to crap. So the housing market bottomed
Yeah.
out. I lost my job. Last one in, first one out. Spent 13 months unemployed, and I applied for over 600 jobs.
Holy.
Most of them government jobs. And I had to keep them, right? Because I'm filing for unemployment. So I kept track of all of them. And I kept applying for the FBI, and I kept getting rejected. So at this point, I probably had 16 years experience. I had an undergraduate degree in business management with a minor in international business. I went to school in France.
So did they tell you why?
I had a 4.0. No, they said you're not qualified. So you apply, and then you just get rejected letter.
Jeez.
And or email. I don't even remember at the time how they were doing it, but I saw that they were hiring for field agent, and I was like, well, I don't want to be one, but might as well, right? So I applied, and I got in, and I was like, what? I can't have a computer, but I can have a gun. I'm like, that makes no sense at all. But okay, so I wasn't sure that I mean, I never really wanted it. I just assumed since they were rejecting me for one, I would be rejected for everything. So that was my first brush with law enforcement. And I still was not sure that I wanted it. And what happened is self-sabotage. So I kept making it past interviews, making it past testing, making it past all this stuff. And I'm just like, the whole time I'm going, but why? why do you want me? And I'm like, and do I really want this? And so I went to the blind panel interview. And so that's like the final part of the process to get in. And I'd done all this, like I read all these books and I did all this stuff and was just still not sure that I wanted it because law enforcement was just never something that had been on my radar. But I loved the analyst stuff. I loved the behavioral side. And then I kid you not. So in a blind panel interview, I had like 3 or 4 agents that I sat in front of, and they know nothing about you. So you have to sell yourself.
Okay.
And I picked imaginary lint off my pants. I made almost no eye contact. I'm sitting there going, yeah. And I'm just like, I was so nervous and so just, I don't know why I'm here. I don't want to carry a gun. I don't want to do this. And then I'm like, I don't know if I'm more afraid of getting it or not getting it. And so then when they send you, they're like, they don't tell you which part you failed. There's 2 parts. One is a written part and then the blind panel. And they just say you have 6 months to go back. And I broke my foot. And it was crazy because it was a really bad break. And I just sent it to my recruiter and I go, yeah, I guess I'm out. I was 37 and you have to be at Quantico. Oh no, I was 36 and you had to be at Quantico by 37. And the doctor was like, we're not going to pin it and you'll never run again. So I was like, oh, well then there you go. See, it was not meant to be. So then, and that was 2009, 2008, 2009. So the process is very long. I think it was like 6 months of testing and interviews before I finally said, I'm out. And then when I was working for my last corporate job, which was the Fortune 500, it was the first time anyone had ever said, hey, we're going to give you the title of head of security. It's like, awesome. And then because I really did like the aspect of protecting, I just still didn't want to be given necessarily that responsibility. I didn't want to be told, hey, look, you have to go out and you have to be one of the most hated people on the planet in uniform. I mean, so we're talking 2015. This was the start of the riots, and it was not a great time. It's like it would have been, I compare it to, it's like me signing up to be a Marine, at the start of the Iraq
Yeah.
War. It's like, hey, I'm all in. And then it took the one incident. And then I could see how that training would make me better at my job. And then, um, yeah, it just turns out I didn't want a cubicle job anymore, period. So
I think that's how a lot of police get in.
they usually do. I did it backwards though, because most law enforcement, they get about 40. They've got their mandatory time in, especially if they started early
Yeah.
20s. And then about the time I'm going into my law enforcement academy is when most at that age, when most officers are like, I'm out, man. I want a cushy desk job. That no one's shooting at me, no one's spitting on me, no one's yelling at me, no one's telling me that they know their rights. I mean, like, I just want quiet and easy and predictable.
Yeah, you're definitely not.
And me, I did the opposite.
Well, so kind of on that too. So what was the thing that drove you to writing this book? So why now? Why'd you pick this topic in particular? Like, I guess you can gather that from your background to some degree, but why these specific topics for the civilian audience? But I think it's for everybody. So what got you into writing?
So everything that I do on the consulting side is all word of mouth. And because of the State Department stuff that I was doing, I kind of keep a low profile on social media. So I have an Instagram. I think I have three things that I posted on there, and I think two of them are directly related to the book, and
Mhm.
one of them is my cat. I mean, like that's I don't use it to really to sell my services. I do have a website that shows all the consulting that I do, but because of my interactions with law enforcement and security overseas, I tend to not put myself out there. I'll give you an example. When I was doing my master's, which is in criminal justice behavioral science, that was when I took it to the next level on reading behavior and looking at prevention through behavioral profiling. And I was publishing my all my the work that I was having to write, so all my papers. I was just putting them out on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and I wrote about a specific terrorist organization, and then when I went to go work with the State Department, when we talk about terrorist organizations, we just say terrorists. We don't list the names of the terrorist organizations. Although you can go to the State Department, they'll tell you, here's all that. There's 67
Yeah.
that are designated international terrorist organizations. And but as part of the ATA, which is the Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program, we were not permitted to say specifically this is who is a terrorist organization. And that's important because if you're working in places like Lebanon, and I've been there a couple of times, then you're not quite sure who supports what when they're sitting in front of you in a classroom.
Oh,
So
okay.
right before I started to work overseas, I went in and deleted a whole bunch of papers that I had put out for that reason. And I mean, when you're there, you're a target anyway. The people that you're working with are targets because they're working with Americans, to counter extremism in their own country. But a friend of mine told me, he said, it'll be a lot easier for you to get for people to see what you can do if you wrote a book about the stuff that you were doing. So I made a list of things that I'd done. I do a lot of training for law enforcement, and that's what I do overseas. And then I train law enforcement here in the States. Haven't ever trained any in Canada, not yet, but I could get and then I had civilian stuff because of the consulting that I do for workplace violence prevention. So I have different courses, and I work with a lot of organizations like FBSN, which is Faith Based Security Network, keeping churches safe, Armed Women of America, which is
Hmm.
women helping keep women safe. And so I had all of these things that I had put together, whether it's public speaking or actual courses. And I thought, what I could do is just take everything that I have on the civilian side and then write a book. And all the research had all been done. And so my book, I think it's like 7 pages where I cite all my sources because I'm a research I'm a research writer. I learned that from my master's. But what I did was I just took everything and then anything that needed to be updated. I went and did more research and then just tried to organize everything. And it just made it go pretty fast. And because I had all of these PowerPoints done, at one point during COVID, I had written narratives because I did built some online training. So I had to do recordings and stuff. So I was like, wow, the book is pretty much written. I just have to put it all together. So it made it easier. And then it kind of showcases, hey, this is what I'm about. This is what I
Okay.
teach. And that's where the idea came
So it's
from.
it's like an exposure piece, especially if you're not doing all the social media because of the people you work with or the jobs that you're
Yeah.
holding. Yeah, that would definitely make it hard if you're going into the individual world of just your own consulting business. You have to market yourself somehow. I mean, and even when I'm looking through the book, there's a lot of pieces in there that you can see, like you do speak to a lot of the things you do or have done. So it's kind of all in there. How long did it take you to write the book then?
So I started creating a list of things a list of books, and then I landed on this is how I'm going to build it, outline it. That would have been in December 2022, December 22. And I'm hoping I have that right. And then I finished it in June of no 23. I
Okay.
finished writing it. It was ready to go to the editor in June of 24.
Okay.
And then that the editing process takes as long as writing the
Yeah.
book. So for me, it took, and I really thought I could get it done faster, but with my travel and the other stuff that I was doing, it really did take a lot longer. I think I wrapped it up. I went to London for behavioral analysis conference in like May, and I remember like sitting in the hotel room, after the conference, and I'm like, I'm just gonna like knock out some more on this book, and I realized, wait, I think I'm done.
Oh yeah.
So at that point, I was like, I better start trying to find an editor. I had a publisher, but it had to be completely edited and completed when I sent it. So I found an editor, and that part takes a long
Okay.
time. So then you get stuff back from the editor, and you're like, don't tell me how to write my book. But having an editor it's amazing, and having somebody who really makes you look at it from a different perspective, and you're like, oh, so who are you marketing to? And she's like, you need to explain this and you need to explain that, and I'm
Yeah, you didn't think about a lot of things, right?
like,
They have a different perspective.
yeah. So when I'm teaching, I can explain it standing in front of them, but once it's in print, right? I mean, like all the explaining has to be already in there. They can't ask questions, and they can't. So that part was definitely was a learning curve for me
Hmm.
on how to everything that I normally, which I love the conversation. So I don't want to just stand in front of people and tell them everything. I want to engage them, and I want to hear their stories, which is part of why I have so many great stories in my book, is that I share stories I've heard from other people. And I got the permission to add it to the book. And it really makes a huge difference in relating the material to real life.
Yeah. Well, and you do have a lot of stories in there. Like I am surprised at how many people you were able to collect these from. That's a lot of work in and of itself. Um, just I want to make sure we get into what you're doing now. So your actual consulting. Um, can you tell me just a bit about the work you're doing? Like, how often do you travel? Are you like all constantly going around the world? Are you mostly in the U.S. now? What does your work look like?
And I've taken a step back from the work I was doing overseas. And, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning is 24
Yeah.
countries. So it's about 40 contracts in 24 countries in less than 6 years. And I think that I just kind of got to the point where I was like, man, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And and I'm starting to see more of all of the stuff that I learned, especially the counterterrorism stuff that I've been doing for the last 6 years. Like, there's not a whole lot of people that have that skill set, and I could be using it here in the US instead of, going
Mm.
overseas and teaching other law enforcement and security how to do it. I should be doing it here. And I think where I was pressing hard for law enforcement to let me in to train on it, and they're like, terrorism isn't a problem in the US. And I'm like, it's not a problem because it's not a problem. Or is it not a problem because we're not trained to see it, to identify it?
Yeah.
And now things have shifted, and more agencies they really start to see this. No, this is definitely a problem.
I do want to just say on that, and I think you say it very well. It's, are we trained, or how'd you say it? We're trained not to see it, or we just don't see it?
So no, so if it is it not a problem because it's really not a problem, or is it not a problem because we haven't trained to identify it?
I think that you could say for a lot of things, and this is from the policing world. Like, there was an article that went out a while ago, and it was about cartels and a local street gang here. Like, they're big numbers wise, but it talked about the cartel selling drugs to this street gang. And I remember a lot of cops going like, "This is the most bullshit thing ever. What does the cartel have to do with like people on this one street here, or it's like the lowest of the socioeconomic groups and stuff?" And it's like, well, it's just one degree of separation. Like, if you actually dug into it, you would see there are connections. It's not hard to find, but people just don't. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to ask. They don't even know where to look for stuff. And it's like, how do we get these things in front of people? How do we get them interested and seeking out that information? So,
Well, I saw the same thing for our agency. Our town was split by Highway 75, and that is a straight shot from the southern border into Colorado and further up north. I mean, we weren't identifying human trafficking. We weren't identifying cartel. We weren't identifying. We didn't have training on drug interdiction, so we were missing everything.
wow.
We were, and we weren't missing it because it wasn't that it wasn't a problem. We just weren't trained to
Yeah.
identify it. And so to say, hey, terrorism, it is a problem, but we stopped training on it. So when that happened it actually happened under the Obama administration. And it doesn't matter right or left side. That's exactly when it happened. And what happened was, when you say we have not had a terrorist incident on American soil in 8 years, what happens to all the funding that went to train law enforcement on counterterrorism? It gets
Yeah.
reallocated. So because then, and like I don't know, I think I talk about this in a paper that I had to write. Oh, my master's thesis, I actually talk about it. So what happens is, it wasn't that he wasn't lying. What they did was they just changed the definition of what constituted a terrorist attack. So you look at San Bernardino, California. They didn't call that. They said that wasn't terrorism. They said the beheading in Moore, Oklahoma. The FBI ruled that it was workplace violence, even though he had links. He had actually was radicalized. It says that he was self-radicalized, but he was actively recruiting people in this small town of Moore, Oklahoma, to his version of Islam. And
Wow.
they just said, well, no, that's workplace violence. But I disagree. I read all of the court documents. I did tons of research on it because, one, the incident changed the trajectory of my life, but it also it impacted how law enforcement sees stuff. So when I would go to law enforcement in the state, and I'm like, hey, look, I teach this course on terrorism ideology, and they're like, oh, well, we don't need that. Terrorism isn't a problem in Oklahoma. Really? Like, from my understanding, two of the 9/11 terrorists trained at one of the airline places here, not airline, but um, took pilot license or pilot training
Okay.
in Tulsa.
Mhm.
So I'm like, but no, Oklahoma City bombing? No, we don't have terrorism. We don't
Well, I
have
think
terrorism.
even sometimes it's just hard to get people to say something. Like they might see something standing out and they just go like, did I really see that? Or, you know,
Yes,
mhm.
yes. They're like, surely not. Not in Oklahoma. I mean, or not here, not in my small town. It's not. And we'll do that with a lot of things. But even we do that just as humans. We like to do that. So we want to second guess. Clearly, that can't be what I think it is. Like that can't be somebody who's trying to attack somebody else, or that I have a bad feeling about this individual. But if I remove myself, then I may offend that person. So what? So offend them.
Yeah.
But we've all been taught to be nice. We don't say things. We just don't do things that we don't want to be the bad guy. I don't want to be an asshole.
You had it in your book how if the bigger the crowd, that the more likely
Oh yeah.
people won't report because they're like, well, someone else will do it.
Yes. So that was it. There was a study that was done on that, and so there's the so it's the and I apologize because I'm not going to be able to think of what it's called now. So the more people watching, the more people that think, oh, well, I don't need to report it. Somebody else is going to report it.
Yeah.
Or they default their actions to what other people are doing. So if you look at something and you go, man, that looks like it's a problem. But then you start looking at everybody else. Does anybody else see what I'm seeing? Well, nobody else is reacting. So maybe I'm overreacting.
Yes.
And so we will default to whatever, monkey see, monkey do. Well, nobody else is seeing it's a problem, so might be the problem. And even, I mean, I've been in situations where, and I'll say even recently, have been in situations where I'm like, this, this feels bad. Like this feels really bad, and I would second guess myself because I'm like, but is it really bad?
Hmm.
So it's very human to do it. And I wrote a book about not doing it.
Yeah.
And still I still find myself, I'm like, what is it really? And I was actually in a foreign country and I was just like, this feels, it feels really bad.
That almost shows how strong, I don't know, the human behavior is, the nature of it is, that even somebody who's an expert in it, the authority in it, that you can have hesitation and second guess. So it's difficult to overcome.
There's a great case study that I use. I teach a course on behavioral pattern detection, and it's for law enforcement. And I do one for civilians, but the one for law enforcement includes case studies that I don't include for civilians. And there's a case that happened in there's a Panera Bread, which is just like it's like a cafe type place, but it's that there's tons of them all over the U.S., at least in the Midwest. And there was a guy that had come in and he sat down, and the staff got a really bad feeling, so they called the cops. And the cop came in and he sat down across from the guy, and he's trying to have a conversation. He's trying to get him to engage, and he won't engage in any of the conversation. And at some point, he was actually sitting there with a gun under the table, and he shot the police officer. So then it becomes this huge chase, and the guy leaves. What they find out later was that before the cops got there, this female had come in and sat down really close to him. She was somebody they interviewed later. She had my background. Like her background was behavioral threat assessment.
Oh.
Um, and she told them she didn't notice anything, didn't see anything. And I said, it's because we can't be on all the time.
Hmm.
But everyone else saw something. And it's the people who work there had a baseline, right? They know how people act when they come in to get something to eat. And this guy acted outside, 100% outside of that. And so they knew something was wrong. They called, but here you have a professional sitting at a table adjacent to him that didn't pick up on anything. And my guess is when she walked in there, she had turned everything off. She's like, I'm here to eat lunch and I just want to eat lunch. But she told him, she told the cops, she told the investigative people and the media when they showed up, they interviewed her, and she was like, he did not display anything out of the ordinary. And I'm like, it's not true. She just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And you can't be on all the time. And even as law enforcement, um, you will actually, like, I would seek out places where I could feel comfortable. So anymore, I don't do large scale events. I think the last thing I went to, and I took my grandkids to it, was the Savannah Banana game in Kansas City, and that was that was the last time I've been in a large scale event. And it's still that, now I'm responsible for these two small people, and so I've got to be on some. But if I'm on 100%, then I'm not enjoying myself.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to find that balance.
Well, it's the balance between vigilance and paranoia, and I think one of the things that seems a little disingenuous, like on the political side of it, is when if police say, "Hey, we need to be careful of this," or "There's a lot of violence in this area," people say, "Well, you're just fear mongering and you're trying to scare people," and you usually get that rhetoric from the politicians, and it's like we're warning you that it's just not as safe. Like maybe when you go here, go in a group or not have your face buried in your phone type stuff.
And take your earbuds out.
Yeah.
I mean, just be aware, because the people that are looking for victims, they're looking for people who aren't paying
Hmm.
attention. And it's hard to prove a negative. So if you go to a place that is, I mean, I was recently in London, and they're all about, man, they're attacking people, they're stealing phones, they're robbing people, that, like, you hear all of this stuff, and then you go and you're like, okay, so I'm not going to walk around with my phone out like this, right? I'm going to put it up. I'm going to do this stuff to keep myself safe, and I'm going to pay attention to my surroundings. And then nothing happens, and you can be like, well, London's not that dangerous. Well, how do you know that it's not that dangerous? Maybe you just made yourself less of a
Yeah.
target because you were paying attention.
Yeah.
So, but that's, again, so I deal with that with organizations, because they'll be, oh, we spent money on security last year, we're not going to waste money on it this year. So, like, no, that's actually a good thing. But how do you prove that the money? I mean, if they say they wasted money, how do you prove it wasn't wasted? You actually prevented anything.
So that's something that when I was on the gang suppression team up here and we had to justify our existence, this happened, like every year they argue about budgets in city hall and stuff. And then they come back and go like, okay, do we need this unit, or who's not doing whatever? So that's one thing that we ran into an issue with, was how do we justify our existence? Because a large part of what we did was proactively walking through venues. So this is everything from nightclubs to lounges to just normal restaurants like a Denny's. So we would walk through those. We go through concerts. We'd go to what's called K Days here, is like a big fair with all the rides. And we would find people that are known gang members to us, or people that we have intel on, or just people who are exhibiting kind of violent behavior, or giving off that aura that it's like, I'm a big wheel, I'm super cool, and I'm some big dog walking through here. So we would do all these things proactively, and it's like, well, how do I say I prevented a murder from happening right now? Right? Unless I get informant info after the fact saying, hey, you guys walked through this, and this group was here and that group was there and they had guns, and then you guys walked through and, like, you remember you kicked all those guys out. Yeah. Like they were about to wait outside and start a shootout, but then you guys were around. We would get that all the time, but that doesn't get quantified in any way. So yeah, how do you convey these stories to the people with the money or the decision makers? It's tough.
Oh, well, that's a great example of that is Aurora, Colorado, the shooting at the movie
Mm.
theater, because the first movie theater the shooter went to, there was an armed guard outside. And I don't know if he was an off duty police officer or what he was, but his presence standing there, he left and found another movie theater further away, but that was not his first target. So that's something that they could actually prove, but it's rarely that way. And if you are, so I'm vigilant. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to do all this stuff. And when something feels off, I'm going to remove myself. And then you remove yourself and you're like, yeah, but nothing. And then later you go back and look, yeah, but nothing happened. I mean, I left, but there wasn't an incident. How do you know that you removing yourself may have been the reason nothing
Mhm.
happened. I mean, it's hard to prove that. And in law enforcement, it's a great point that you make because you're trying to sell your command staff. Hey, look, no, you should keep putting money into this program. It works. Look, I mean, unless you can show this is what crime was before we started and this is where it is now and show that it continues to go down, but it's not all that cut and dry. It's difficult to believe.
Even thinking about it as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I wonder how many times when we walk through some of our problem venues, just simply doing a walkthrough, or maybe we do engage with somebody or kick somebody out, how many of those nights ended with a big brawl inside or outside? Like, was our, even if we walk through like 2 hours before or 4 hours before the end of the night, does it set a certain tone? And would we be able to quantify that? Um, we'll need someone to collect all those stats though. So,
Yeah, and that costs money.
yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask was, is most of your work, or is there a balance of it? Is it individual to individual, or are you mostly working with governments and big organizations?
Um, Mostly big organizations. So I've done a few smaller things, but it's it's expensive.
Mhm.
So I've worked with a couple of private individuals on stalking and that kind of stuff. But the average person that would probably need my services um, can't afford. They can't justify
Yeah.
that kind of. It's the same thing as like having an attorney. Well, I mean, I've dealt with stalking personally. So then you're like, you go to an attorney and say, okay, so how do I stop this? And they're like, oh, well, it's going to be really, 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 really
Yeah.
expensive. And you're like, oh, no, I can't afford that. So the book is meant to help people save themselves because even in law enforcement we're sworn to protect and serve, and if that means giving my life in the service of the community, then that's what I'm sworn to do, but I only have one,
Mhm.
right? So I can give it up one time, but if we and not just me as an individual but in law enforcement. So the good thing about the book is that for law enforcement, if you're going to a build a community outreach program and say, hey, look, we want to work with you. We want to help empower you to keep yourself safe because we're coming. I mean, we'll be there. But what you do in the moments before we get there can impact whether or not you survive. And there's no guarantees. I mean, you could just be lucky. And I'm like, in all honesty, I would rather be lucky than
Yeah.
good. But you could do everything right and you could still not survive. You could do everything. You could do absolutely the worst stuff possible and still end up being like the only survivor. And you just got super lucky. So even just reading the book doesn't guarantee anything. But you're never going to know how much you prevented or how safe you kept yourself or your community or your family by changing your behaviors and understanding that you can impact the outcome. They, I cover concealed carry in my book because for Americans it's a big deal.
Mm.
But I also want people. I'm never going to tell somebody don't charge towards the threat. I'm never going to tell somebody not to do that. Yes, you could die, and you should understand that that could be the outcome. But if it's in you to be that person who runs towards danger to save other people, there's not that many people that will do it.
Yeah.
So why would I tell somebody don't? I had a I had a I taught at a hospital, and one of their chief of surgery told me afterwards. He said, I carry and this is what I do. And what are your thoughts about me getting involved? And I said, well, one, how often do you train? Because that's really important. I mean, in law enforcement, that it's everything to us, and we still don't train as much as we
Yeah.
should. But as a civilian, how much are you training? Why I train? I'm like, okay, so you do understand that you could be mistaken for the guy with the gun. If law enforcement shows
Mhm.
up and you're the only one holding a gun and they could shoot you and you may never even hear them say drop the gun because they may be screaming it as they're firing. That's just the way we're trained to deal with an active shooter event. And you could die. Or do you accept all of that? And if you do, then do it, but don't do it and not train, and don't do it and think that, well, you're going to be the hero of your own story and there's no possible bad outcome. Because there's several. I think I covered 12, and I cover 6 where the shooter, where the person trying to intervene died.
Yeah.
And then 6 where they didn't. So I'm like, you just have to be accepting of that. And I don't always teach that. I put it in the book because it's a question I often get. But the surgeon told me, he goes, I went to another active threat course and I asked the instructor and he goes, well, you're just going to die. And I was like, well, yeah, that's a possible outcome, but I don't think that's the only one. And I think it's fair that we examine all possible outcomes, because there's just not enough people that are willing to get involved. They're just, I don't want to get involved. I mean, some people don't even want to get involved in saving themselves. And I would like to change that. I would like more people to be comfortable with the conversation. Yeah, it's scary. It's a scary topic. I think the book broaches the subject very differently than a lot of people do, because it's not all like die, awful blood and guts. And it's not like that at all. I want it to be a topic. And like at one point I talk about teaching kids, and I've had a lot of people ask me like, well, how would you suggest, talking to kids about this? And I'm like, well, however you talk to your kids about everything else, how do you teach them not to play in the street? Then teach them the same thing. Yeah. It is scary as parents. It's scary to us. So we tend to let that anxiety out as we're trying to like teach them a scary topic. But if you teach them this and you calm yourself so that you can teach them the same way, hey, look, just don't play in the street. I mean, I tell people, I'm like, you don't really want me teaching your kids, because I grew up, you don't play in the street. My mom took me out and showed me roadkill. And she said, this is what happens when you play in the street. Not all people want their kids taught that way. So I'm like,
I think there is an aspect though, like, this has been kind of bred out of humans over the last 100 years, but everything before that, this was a normal part of life. So there's been a change where people, it's just, everything's left up to law enforcement or left up to the politicians. And it's like, no.
Or the teachers, or they don't want to, it's just like, I'll let somebody else teach my kids. I don't want to be bothered with it. Or, that's why I send them to public school. But I think maybe there's a little change that I've seen in that. And that's because when, during COVID, when kids had to sit in front of a computer screen and all of a sudden their parents are hearing what they're learning and how they're learning, and they're like, oh, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not the best for my kid. And so more parents are, I'm hoping more parents are like willing to go, you know what, let me do that. Let me teach them. I want to empower individuals. So once you're empowered, I mean, as a parent, if you're like, well, the topic scares me, so I don't know how to teach my kid. So if it stops being a scary topic to the parent, then they can better broach the subject with the child. And like I gave the example in my book, when my grandson was like 2, we started playing hide and seek, and he was horrible at it to begin with. I mean, he would go climb under the covers, and the whole time he's just moving around and laughing. And I'm like, man, dude, you suck at this. Like, but we would have the best time ever. And now he is 9. And I can't tell you the number of times I gave up, because he can squeeze himself into the smallest places. And he's so good at it now. And now he's teaching his little sister how to better hide, because she's 4, she's 5, and she needs a little help with it. But at one point, in the last 2 years, I mean, he and I talk about safety all the time. His dad's a former Marine and a firefighter, so he gets a lot of exposure to safety. And I told him, I'm like, yeah, like if something happened, like if somebody broke into the house, do you know where you would hide so they couldn't find you? And do you know how fast you could get there? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And it started out as a game, and it's a game, but it's not, it's something that he can use to keep himself safe. So we have random conversations, just like when he feels like he's up to it. We talk about safety, and we talk about not just stranger safety. We talk about adults that he knows. I mean, he's in sports on like coaches. Like sometimes the threat to a child is someone that's known. It's a friend of the family. It's an uncle. And those tend to be the worst because, and we do things such as, tell your kid, oh, go give him a hug.
Yeah.
Well, you're putting your kid in a position whether they want to hug that adult or not. So now they feel they're supposed to be nice. And that's where it's bred into us that we're like, oh, we want to be polite.
Mm.
We don't want to offend somebody. And so now it's like I tell my daughter, mostly with my granddaughter, because she's a very opinionated little thing. So I'll be like, hey, can I have a hug? And she's like, no. And then my daughter's like, no. And I go, nope, I don't want it. Unless she wants to give me a hug, I want her to learn that she doesn't have to do that if she doesn't want to. But it's not how I raise my kids. I mean, my girls, I was like, no, give them a hug, be nice, give them a hug because you want to teach your kids to be polite. And then you get older and you're like, man, it's not.
I wouldn't have even considered that scenario like that. That's a different way for even me to think. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of this. I love the psychological side and the psychology side to what I do, but I'm not a psychologist. But I look at like how was I raised and what does that impact on me and what have I had to overcome? And then you start looking at, okay, so if I'm going to train people, then these are things that I'm having to overcome, that they're going to have to overcome. So if I can make, say, hey, look, I'm just like you. And even though this is my profession, I still have to overcome all of the stuff that was deeply ingrained in me from the time I was little. And I will tell you, it's like, I could have easily been, because of my childhood, could have easily grown up to be a criminal.
Yeah.
And when I watch these people get in fist fights on airplanes over and I've flown enough that I've flown a lot. And there are times where I'm like, oh, see, this is why people choose violence.
Yeah.
So you're like, so when you recognize that within yourself, then you're like, it's easier to detect it in other people too. So I mentioned if you want to know when people are lying, identify how you lie, and you'll start seeing it in other people as well.
Well, kind of on that, and just we're getting close to the end of the time. So if you got a hard out, let me know. It'll be the last thing I bug you about, because if people don't realize, and I'll show you this on here, because I was reading your book, and I literally I go through and I make notes on chapters. I do a lot of research on this stuff, so I hope people appreciate this podcast. And it's also why it takes me like a month to read a book. I'm super slow to begin with, but then I'm also making a lot of notes. But the thing that really interests me from this book, and I was telling the guys in the gang suppression team, this is why they got to read the book, was the stuff on the behavioral pattern detection. And then kind of underneath that, it was that standard identification model. So this was talking about behavior, but you're looking at people's movement, their associations, their reactions to you, to the environment. And this is something that we were actually missing, I would say, when I was in the unit. And everything in our job comes down to articulation. Why did you pick on my client? Why did you even look at them in the first place, even though there's 1,000 people in there? And we were always missing that element for the articulation part. And I think this stuff is 100% exactly how it would be explained. So I'm wondering if you could explain it, because I wouldn't be able to do it justice. I would definitely need a course in this. But when we walk into an environment, and I'll just use a nightclub as an example, one of the first things that we do, we go in, and it's not a secret, so I'm not giving away any trade secrets here, but we walk in and we stand just right by the entrance, and you can survey the entire crowd. And usually if I'm up on a higher platform, I'm able to see right to the back. And I want to see whose little head is bobbling around and trying to get through the crowd and get out of here. And like, where did they come from? Because then that group's also going to be of interest. But where did that person go and what are they doing? Did they run out with a gun or are they going to get something? Um, but we also have people who duck behind their friends and are trying to avoid eye contact, and or people make sudden quick movements, and you're like, okay, what does that all mean? But it's not just a single factor, it's everything in your whole environment. So while they're doing that, what are they wearing? What persona are they trying to like project out there? Are they giving me the middle finger while they're doing it? And so it's all these things in the totality of the situation. It's the whole environment. Um, so I was just kind of wondering, like, when you put the scientific part to it or the psychologist part to it, what what does it mean? How do you articulate that? So this behavioral pattern detection stuff.
So when for law enforcement, we have sometimes you have a really short window to detect something, and so you're what happens is you're picking up on all this, and honestly, like the number of times you've been in the nightclub, right? So you know what looks normal, and when you walk into the nightclub, whether you recognize it or not, you're looking for normal, and then anything abnormal stands out. And we call this the 51% rule. So, what are 51% of the people doing? And then anything outside of that will grab your attention. So, you're trying to do this, and you're doing this for depending on how large the scale of the event is, whether this is a nightclub, maybe it's I think what you mentioned, a fair
Yeah,
that you guys do.
we walk through everything, literally, like concerts, fairs, everything.
Yeah. So, but you're having to identify it like within seconds. So you're actually using heuristics as well. So you're like, okay, so if if A equals B equals C squared, and then but your mind is doing it like
Mhm.
this. And the more you exposure you have to any one venue, like how many times have you been to this particular place or this concert or this type of concert? And so you're doing it automatically. What happens to law enforcement is when they're not trained to articulate what it is that what those instincts are. So there's like, oh, I just had this feeling, or oh, like I've
Yeah.
I've been in this situation before, and when I saw this and this and this is the direction that it went. So you're automatically like having to draw lines like from here to here, and you're trying to beat. And I'm just like, if you've ever read the book Left of Bang, you're trying to beat it before it gets to
Mhm.
bang, right? Before it's an incident, you need to be able to identify it, and you're trying to do it on such a large scale. It's so fast that when we start say, say that the incident occurs or whatever, we arrest somebody, then we immediately go to suspicious behavior, and that's what we'll put in our report. But you have to be able to articulate, especially for if it goes to court. You can't just say because they'll say, "Oh, well, he was it. You picked on him because of his ethnicity,"
Yeah.
and you're like, "Well, actually, no, it didn't even occur to me that because I was looking at behavior. But if you don't put that in the report, so what happens is when you walk in, you're looking at two baselines. One is the baseline for the venue. So if you're talking about a concert, a Celine Dion concert is going to have a different baseline than a five finger death punch, right? I mean, the behaviors are going to be very, very different. But you say, well, behavior for a concert. Well, what kind of concert? So to say, well, it was suspicious behavior. So what about the behavior was suspicious? Well, where everyone else is acting this way, this is what he was doing. The clothes that he was wearing, and that all comes into the standard where you break down what they're wearing and how they're interacting with others. Where you could say, well, they were acting suspiciously, but really what you wanted to say was they were avoiding anyone in uniform.
Yeah. Okay.
That is suspicious behavior. But to be able to articulate and say um, he was clearly avoiding anyone in uniform, like he was going out of his way to walk around law enforcement or security personnel. Um, he was wearing a trench coat and it was 103 degrees outside. He had an odd gait to his walk, which means maybe he was hiding something down one pant leg. Um, his clothes were oversized. His clothes weren't typical for the temperature. But his clothing didn't match what everyone else was
Mhm.
wearing. I talk about the rule of three, which is if you have three low risk behaviors, then there's usually something going on. So if you look at what was he wearing, how he was walking, how he was trying to pretend he was clearly with someone else, but they were trying to pretend like they didn't know each other. To be able to articulate that as a law enforcement, you immediately recognize that that's what's going on. But in the moment, I mean, it's happening. Sometimes it's happening so fast that your brain is processing it, but it's almost it's so automatic that you don't recognize that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Behavioral product detection, it's being able to teach law enforcement, this is what you're doing, and this is how you're going to articulate it. And then you talk about articulatable facts versus inference, which is heuristics. I know that this is what he was likely doing, but can you say this is exactly what he was doing? And those are two different things. And I talk about that for civilians when they're trying to report something. And like you can say, there's a video where this lady pulls up to a gas station and she's on the opposite side pumping gas, and another truck comes up and the person on the passenger side gets out, goes around, opens her car door, scrunches down, opens the car door, pulls something out and shuts it, goes back in, and they take off. And I ask people, I'm like, what do you know for sure? Like, you know what color the car was, you know what color the truck was. The truck had tinted windows. You can say that. They're like, oh, well, there were two people in the truck. Now, do you know that? Or you know that one person was on the passenger side because that's who got out, one person was driving.
Mm-hmm.
Anything beyond that, right? If it's tinted windows, there could have been a lot more people in that truck. It could have been a clown car, right? I mean, so it's drawing that line between what you know for sure, what you witnessed, versus what likely happened. And they're like, oh, well, her purse was stolen. Can you tell that from the video? Well, no. Well, then that's inference. So all of that works in our favor when we have to write our report, and then when we have to go testify, that we're testifying only to the part that we know for sure. So then I talk about, so we have three low risk behaviors, and this is, you're back in their setting, and then you have high risk behavior. So you can sit and watch somebody do something. The story that I tell in the book is about watching the guy. He's got a paper, and I'm sitting at the gate, and he has a backpack, and he puts the backpack up on the seat next to him. He takes his paper and he starts tucking the paper around the backpack. And I'm like, and I start looking around because I'm like, and is anybody else watching this? And then he stands up and walks away from it. I'm like, oh, that's high risk behavior.
Yeah.
Like, you don't walk away from a bag at an airport. Now, I'm not going to jump up and start screaming, Mom. I could have, like, there were other things after the fact that I thought about. I could have said, hey, sir, you shouldn't, is that your backpack? To make sure that he knows that I saw him walk away from it. Instead, I grabbed my friend and I was like, we're going. And he's like, what are we doing? And I'm like, I'm watching. How fast is he trying to get away from that bag?
Mm-hmm.
And what direction? And that's what I'm doing, because if I need to say something, then I need to know at what point to say that, because that's like yelling fire in a crowded room, right? I don't want to do it unless I absolutely have to. But at this point, I'm going the direction he's going. Turns out he was hiding it because he wanted to go talk to the gate agent, and then went back and got his bag. But that could be high risk behavior.
That wasn't a good job at hiding it.
No. You only need one high risk behavior. And as law enforcement, you should be stepping in and making contact. If it's three low risk behaviors, there's likely something going on, but you're not entirely sure what it is. So I talk about the two baselines. One is the baseline for the setting. The other one is the baseline for the individual.
Okay.
So we're all a little weird. We all have our own little quirks, and you're not going to know what's normal for that individual until you make contact. So if you are, and I don't know if you guys ever do this, but I've worked several large scale events on threat assessment teams where we had UC teams, so undercover teams. And your job is to identify, because, people who don't want to be identified as outside the baseline, they're going to be super sneaky around anyone in uniform. But anyone else, the general public, they're going to be like, they're not paying attention. And they're banking on the average citizen not paying attention.
And that's why I say, like, when we would walk into a place, the first thing you want to do is, we don't walk in and like spotlight ourselves, or it's like we walk in and we're standing in the back in the dark and just observing, and we're not interacting. And it's all our focus is, near and far. And it's looking at how everybody's interacting with one another. Because I want to see those behaviors. I want to see who is, taking up all the space and everybody has to walk around because this person's so important. And then it's like,
Yeah.
I want to talk to that guy or girl. There's sometimes girls are pretty bad to deal with too. But it's all those behaviors.
Sometimes
Yeah.
worse.
So, and then when you get up to them, you see, okay, well, now maybe something's different when they're talking to me. Maybe all of a sudden they're respectful because they just want me to go away. But when I was watching
Yeah.
you interact with this random other kid in the bar or wherever it is, you were shoving them or kind of making your presence known. Like, well, what's that about? So,
So they when you're interacting with that person, and you had talked about that what they're trying to sell. What is that persona that they're trying to sell? And are they putting themselves out there as that I'm a big deal and you need to recognize and then changing that tone when they're with law enforcement, or are they trying to slip under the radar?
mhm,
And so I've seen that on a far bigger scale than like I haven't dealt with gangs like you have, but so the people that I've seen are they want to fly under the radar, and what they do is they create this lie, and that lie comes out in what they're trying to sell. So if I am trying to plan an attack, then I'm going to try to fit in because the greatest chance of me being successful is I have to get through the planning
mhm,
phase. So I need to go undetected while I'm planning. So if I'm going to go and I'm going to scope a place out, I'm going to test it. I'm going to see how easy it is to get in. I'm going to see if anybody interacts with me. And then if they do, I'm going to have all of these preconceived lies made up. So here's the questions I think I'm going to be asked. Who are you? Why are you here? What are you doing? And then I'm going to have lies to all of those. So when you are trying to determine somebody's baseline and you start the conversation, another thing that's important to remember is that sometimes the response that you get is based on what you put out
yeah,
as law enforcement. You go to make contact and you show up and you're like, I don't want to cuss too much, but the effort here for,
I've never sworn on the job. I promise.
yeah, me neither. So you're like, what, why the F are you here? What are you doing? And you're going to be met with the same resistance or met with a lot of resistance or the same attitude versus, hey, um, make yourself more presentable. Hey, I'm Officer so-and-so. I just noticed and then just start to ask questions. And you always start with questions that you know that they're going to,
Yeah.
that they probably have. That is one baseline. When you start asking random questions that are so far outside, and I'll give you an example. So when I did Homeland Security training in Israel. When I was trying to leave the country, I'm standing in the line, and I get approached, and the guy is like, "You have two last names," which isn't true. I actually have a middle name, but they saw that as two last names. So in a lot of
mhm,
countries, people will have they'll have two. So he asked me, he goes, "You have two names, and what is this name?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's my middle name." And they go, "Oh, so why did your parents name you that?" And I was like, I don't want to sound like a smartass, but I just think they liked the name. Oh, okay. And then they ask like, "Rand, do you have siblings? What's your brother's names?" And just like, and then they were like, "What's your dad's name?" Well, my dad had been in the picture since I was like 4 or 5. And so when they asked that question, I went totally blank because I was like, and then the more nervous I got about not having an answer, the harder it was to get the answer. So I literally could have given them any name. Like they don't care what my dad's name was. What they cared was, why did she have answers to all of these questions? But when I asked her this one, she
yeah.
paused. And so then he just goes, "Okay." And he goes, "You took a while to answer that question. Why?" And I was like, "Well, because he wasn't in my," so now I have to give him the Jerry Springer version of, like, I'm sure he doesn't want all of that, but he left when I was little. He died, like 5 years ago. I'm like, I didn't know him. And he's like, "Oh, okay." So when we are asking questions, ask questions that you think they're already gonna they're already going to have lies about. And then ask them just random questions that have nothing to, then they're going to go, wait, now, did they pause because it was a crazy
Yeah.
question? Or did they pause because now they'd already been lying for so much, they're not sure if they should be honest or if they should lie about that. So always have like an idea of like, if I'm going to go make contact, what are the questions that I'm going to ask?
I think that's spot on. It's exactly what we try to do. Like but it's not even just for the gang suppression stuff. It literally, like, police officers in general. Um, the way I worked in gang unit is the same as the way I work in patrol or any other unit I've been in. And half the time, I take a lot of the stuff from just the interviewing that we do and the techniques in there and use those on the street. But it's like exactly what you're talking about. So I think this is stuff that is pertinent for everybody to learn. Um, just as we're kind of at the end of the time here, I wanted to make sure that you get a chance to just say how people can find you, follow your work. Obviously, we've talked about the book; it's on Amazon, and I'll put links up to your website and the book in the episode descriptions. But anywhere else that people can find you, or are you just still a ghost?
I'm pretty much a ghost. I have no problem answering phone calls, but only after I know who somebody is, because I'm tired of being sold extended car warranties
Yeah.
for cars I don't anymore. I'd say the best way to reach me, like if you want to talk to me about consulting, the best way to do that is through my Gmail
Okay.
account. Um, you can pull that off of my website, or it's just my first and last name at gmail.com. I will always respond at minimum within 24 hours. I will always respond. I have taught at several law enforcement conferences. So recently I was at OTOA, which is the Ohio Tactical Officers
Okay.
Association. And I'm getting ready to go back up there and teach for another agency. We're going to do like 3 days of training. So we're going to do terrorism ideology and behavioral pattern detection. And that course it's really a great course because it's a lot in 2 days. And you've got a half a day of classroom and then a half a day, you're going to plain clothes, passive observation.
Hmm.
And you're just going to go out and a large scale event or a mall or wherever we can get approval to go and just go and hang out. And I can't tell you the number of times that we've actually caught some things going on. And that's not even the goal. The goal is just to go and watch and identify what normal behavior is, and then just say, hey, here's what I found that kind of stood out to me. And then the next day we go back and we talk about planning ops. And then we go back and we do role playing. So we'll have role players that will operate in the same place that we were the day before. And their job is to not just to be able to pick it up, but and because sometimes we've actually had to use role players that other law enforcement officers, and like they're picking them out because they see them. But the rule is they're like, oh, like that's him. Like I know. So I'm like, but the rule is if they make contact and they can't articulate what in the behavior drove them to that, then I'm like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you fail. And I need them to be able to articulate it was this behavior, because that is such a huge part of what we're doing and driving them towards being able to verbalize what it is that your mind has already been doing the whole time that you've been in law
Yeah.
enforcement,
Very
and
important.
being able to just, yeah, this is what it was, not just saying, well, he behaved suspiciously. Well, let's use our big boy words. And what exactly in there, what is in his clothing. And what that does is that keeps the word profile from being that negative, which it has become in the last 20 years. I mean, they're like, oh, you were profiling. Well, but what type of profiling are we using?
Yes.
Behavioral profiling is absolutely a must, and we have to use that. And even civilians have to be able to use behavioral profiling. I mean, they have to like look at something and go, that behavior is standing out to me. I'm going to remove myself. I'm going to report this person. And even as civilians, to be able to go and give that definition. Hey, look, this is how he was dressed, and nobody else was dressed like that. This is how he was behaving, and nobody else was behaving that way. The case of John LaDue is a fantastic example, because The girl that saw him was able to tell law enforcement, "Hey, look, I've lived next door to the storage unit for forever. No one ever walks through my backyard. This kid walked through my backyard. He got up there. He took too long to open the door. I thought he was trying to break in. He gets in. He walks in and shuts himself inside. I've lived here this long. I've never seen, no one ever shuts themselves inside." She could articulate all of that to law enforcement, and law enforcement went, "There's definitely something going on." Instead of just saying, "Hey, there's a suspicious guy who walked through my backyard," and then and then law enforcement is like, "Okay, we'll get to it when we
Yeah.
get to it." Because for every one good lead that we get, one legitimate report that we get, what 1,000 ridiculous
Yeah.
ones that mean absolutely nothing. So teaching civilians, and it's like in law enforcement, it's our job to teach them how to report. We can't just go see something, say something, and not tell them what they're looking for and how to report it to us. And then, the John LeDoux case I cover in the book, but that was an, a school shooting that never happened.
Yeah.
And that whole warehouse, the whole storage unit that he walked into was full of bomb making supplies and ammunition. And he had more at his house, and he had all these pressure cooker bombs that he was going to set off. And it never happened. It never happened because one person saw something, knew how to articulate what she had seen, and then knew how to share that information with law enforcement. And they acted on it immediately. He was still inside the storage unit.
Well, I think that it's a good point where it's the follow through and the follow up are necessity. So you have to make sure that, it's not just, hey, you showed up and we checked these boxes. There's got to be some more to it and the continuation of it. So,
I would love to see law enforcement do more on the community side, the
yeah.
community engagement side, because honestly, one, it's the only way that we're going to build that rapport back to where it was before. And two, we rely on them. I mean, they're the best tool that we have in policing, but only if we teach them, "Hey, look, this is how powerful you are in keeping the community safe. This is what you can do, and you can do stuff that we can't do because this is your community and you're in it all the time." I mean, depending on how big the town is that you work in, right? Like mine was super small, but if you're working in a huge city, you're not going to have that same baseline that they've already developed for their street, for their neighbors,
Yeah.
for their place of business, for their kids' school. We're not going to have that. They will. But unless we teach them, "Hey, this is what we're looking for. This is what you're looking for. And when you bring it to us, this is how we need you to report it. This is what you're looking for. The standard identification model, like this is what we need from you. What were they wearing? What was the behavior that was outside the norm?" And if you can't describe exactly what they were doing, describe what the norm was. And again, if you look for abnormal, you're going to see it everywhere. But if you look for normal, the abnormal will stand out, which will make it easier for you to articulate exactly what it is that you saw.
Awesome. Hey, you know what? That brings us right to the end of the time. I'll have the website and your book links up so people can reach out and also see the material. I want to say this is awesome conversation. I have tons of notes that we didn't even get to. I was nerding out on like half the stuff that's in there. So, no, but thank you for being on here today. I really appreciate it. And, when you're done a few more tours or wherever you're traveling in the world, we'll have to have you back on and talk about what's new.
Well, I'm actually working on a second book, and it's 100% workplace violence. So it's called "You Can't Make Pancakes in Your Cubicle," a study of organizational culture, um, employee behavior, and violence.
Okay. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that.
I'll tell you, the stories that are in there are some of the funniest ones, period. Because after 24 years in corporate, I've got some great stories.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Do you have an idea of when that's coming out yet or no?
Hopefully, early next year.
Okay. Well, then we have a reason to get you on early next year.
It would be an honor. I have really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there. So pass it along. Thanks again.